3 things you need in your next IT job. So I was reading this book, So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, and it was an eye-opening book. Cal Newport, first of all, is an associate professor at Georgetown University, and he beats up on this whole notion of passion, right? Passion and loving what you do. He beats up on it so well that I've adopted this mentality into what I do every day, into the pursuit of learning IT skills and how I feel about IT skills, right? And that wasn't even the part that enlightened me as much as how to work at an actual job, how to exist in an actual role, and what to look for. In this book, he broke down 3 things that makes an employee happy. And it struck me because at my last role, I would say that I was satisfied, I was happy, in the sense that I felt like I was actually serving my team, but still there was a level of stagnation or lack of progression that made me say, I'm gonna go and do something else, right? So I can liken these 3 qualities to an actual experience, an actual work experience that I've had over the course of anywhere between 6 to 9 years. I spent 6 years in a leadership role where I was able to apply and fully live these 3 things. And now I'm going to share the truths and the gems behind merging and marrying happiness or satisfaction with your IT job, with your next IT job. Because a lot of people think that they have to be miserable at work, they have to hate what they do just for a paycheck, but that's not necessarily true in the IT field. I don't know about other fields, but the IT field is sort of a different beast in that regard. So the 3 things. Number 1, you need autonomy. Autonomy is your ability to act independently in your role. It's the lack of micromanagement. So if you have a micromanager who's looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes to make sure that you've resolved an issue for a customer, looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing it the way that he or she wants you to do it, that's not autonomous at all. If you have to feel like you're constantly under pressure to perform in a specific, very specific type of way, aside from the company protocol for troubleshooting and problem solving and things of that nature, then that's not gonna be a satisfying role for you in the long run. You want to look for a position that's gonna allow you to be autonomous, that's gonna allow you to be independent. And this comes at a steep cost. It's a lot more riskier because you are pretty much not allowed to screw up. You have not that much wiggle room to screw up, because if you are autonomous, that is pointing to the fact that you're responsible, you're competent, and you're reliable, amongst many other things. In the last role that I had, I had almost full autonomy to do my job, to act in my role, because I was responsible, I was competent, and reliable. And it took a while for me to get to that level of autonomy, but that's ultimately one of the things that I enjoyed about the role that I was in, right? Now, again, that comes with the caveat, which leads me to my next point. Number 2, competence. This is where certifications and your skills come into play. If you're interviewing at a company and you can successfully demonstrate a certain level of competence, then you can more than likely negotiate your level of autonomy, right? You're definitely gonna go through some training period to get adjusted to the nuances of the role, but ultimately you should be able to apply that competence in such a way where you're giving a certain level of autonomy. So I think that autonomy and competence, they go hand in hand, because no boss is gonna give you a high level of autonomy if you don't know what you're doing, right? So in my last role, I had a high level of competence, and that competence grew each year with experience. And of course, mentorship and guidance from my higher ups as well. So the longer you're in a role, or the longer you're doing something, you build this level of competence that allows for you to negotiate not only more pay, but more autonomy. It gives you more value in that way as well, because if you are competent enough, you can end up solving some specific type of problems that other people don't have expertise on, right? So you definitely, that's something that's very important with regard to the IT sphere, because you need to have those technical skills, which is what we're doing on this channel. We're building up our technical skills, we're learning, we're sharing gems with one another, we're getting those certifications, which a lot of people have a mixed review of. A lot of people have mixed emotions over certifications, but certifications allow for the discipline for you to develop not only the technical skills, but the competence in your field. So what do I mean by competence in your field? Competence in your field means that you understand when and where to use a specific technology, and then the technical skills allow for you to drill down into the nuances of deploying that technology, right? So this is knowledge worker type of stuff, right? You have to constantly be willing to learn and grow. That's why my motto for this channel is learning and growing together, right? Because we are trading information with one another with regard to the happenings in the IT world, with regard to certain skills that are being deployed in the industry right now. And that's where your bread and butter is going to be when getting into an IT role. I look forward to it as well. I look forward to being this lifelong learner that's constantly updating my skills, constantly improving my competence in a role, and being able to provide more value to my customers, right? So that's a very, very important point to keep. Also, keep in mind, and this is what I found fascinating about the book as well, he talks about passion not being mutually exclusive from competence, right? So passion and competence, they go together, and it's a function. Passion is a function of your ability or your level of competence. So not only does your level of autonomy increase as your competence increases, but your happiness and your satisfaction increases, your passion increases when you become more competent. And that's something that I've witnessed within myself. I'm over here looking at my Cisco equipment right now, and I feel so passionate about deploying my technologies, learning new things, and, you know, maybe in the future being able to apply that to the industry, right? So the more competent you get, the happier and more satisfied, and the more you love what you're doing. Some people have it backwards, where it's they love what they do, but their competence may or may not be in question. So that's a part of the book that kind of flipped that notion on its head, right? Do what you love, right? But what you love might not necessarily be what you're the most competent, but what you're the most competent in, you're more than likely, or you have a high probability of being competent in it, right? So that's how I apply this notion of competence first, and then the happiness comes later, or the satisfaction comes later. But not for nothing, I think that I'm in an interesting position because I actually love the IT field. Like, I love being a technologist, learning about the technologies, and I love my little Cisco library, my network engineering library that I'm building over here. And I'm competent to a certain extent, and that makes me happy. I love sharing this type of knowledge with people. I love teaching this type of stuff. As I learn, I like to teach other people. My competence grows because it reinforces the ideas, and it's like this ecosystem of growing competence and growing positive emotions around it, right? Flip that notion on its head, right? And this is the problem with a lot of people that's getting into the IT field. I know quite a few people that are getting into the IT field just for the money. And I get it. You know, we all want to make money, we all want to be successful in things, and we're in this interesting time with regard to the economy. If you don't really love it, or if you don't at least like it a little bit, how are you going to become competent at it? Because there's a certain level, and this is where we kind of contradict. There's a certain level where you have to be motivated to do something, and you have to kind of like what you do. There has to be some sort of reward that's not attached to something external, right? And this is the whole psychological idea of your internal locus of control. That's something that, you know, I picked up studying for psychology, studying organizational psychology as well, right? That's the competence, and I spent the most time on that part because I think it's sort of this competence is the focal point of autonomy, and the next point I'm going to make which is belonging or culture fit in some way, shape, or form, right? The next point, belonging. You have to feel like you belong. And I think this is where the whole idea of culture fit comes up when you're interviewing, right? You might hear your interviewer say, hey, yeah, we want to see if you're a culture fit, right? Whatever that means in their head, it pretty much relates to the idea of belonging. If you feel like you belong, and you actually do belong, you fit the culture of the organizational culture, and you're gonna get a lot more satisfaction out of that than if you did not feel like you belong. So think about your last job. Did you feel like you belong? And if you didn't, how did that relate to your happiness at the job? You didn't necessarily look forward to going into work, right? Even if you're an entrepreneur or you're somebody that is, striking out on their own, there still has to be a certain level of community engagement that keeps you coming back and learning and sharing, because us humans, we're social creatures. We love communicating with one another. We love sharing with one another. Think about the whole idea of sitting down and having a meal together, right? That's something that's intimate, that's something that's sentimental, and that's the way that we bond, right? Even the whole idea of YouTube and how I'm speaking to you right now, you're engaging with my facial expressions, I'm smiling, you can feel the vibes coming through the camera. You can listen to the intonation of my voice, right? So belonging has a lot to do with all of those things, right? And if you don't belong, there's no point in you working at that organization, right? So those are the three things that you need to look for when applying for your next IT job, interviewing for your next IT job, and when you're actually in the role. Keep an audit of those three things. How autonomous are you? How competent are you? And how much do you feel like you belong in this organization? Because that is going to dictate your level of satisfaction and happiness in your role. And again, yes, you can totally be happy at a job. A lot of people are smashing the whole 9 to 5 thing, or 8 to 4, whatever the hours are, 12 to 8. And not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to be somebody that's striking out on their own. So it's totally fine to be happy in a role. But the way that you audit that is making sure that you have those three components in place at the least. And again, those three components are a function of competence, which is why I spent the most time talking about competence. If you're not competent enough, then you won't get a certain level of autonomy. And if you are not competent enough, you won't get a strong sense of belonging, because maybe your team members are more competent than you. You might feel left out. You might have FOMO. On the other hand, maybe you're probably the most technically competent person in the group, and you can share with other people, and that gives you a sense of belonging, if you will, right? Now, this is not to say that there aren't some managers or some bosses that are micromanagers despite your level of competence. And again, this plays into the interviewing process, asking the right questions, asking this key question when you're in an interview. And this is something that I'm gonna apply to my next interview. The question is this: where do you see me fitting into this organization? How do you see me applying my skills in this role, right? And then it turns it on them to say, to sell you on the company, because you'll get a lot of information out of those two questions. If they can't answer the question in a way that reassures you that you're gonna have a certain level of autonomy, a certain level of belonging, then that might not be the company for you, and that's fine. You might just not be a fit. So asking those two questions, will gauge where you belong in the company, what level of autonomy, competence, and belonging is in that company, right? Because some companies are just, they're out there with it. They just, they just build it while they fly, which again is fine. Some people, it works for them. Some people like myself, it doesn't really work for me, right? So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to put that out there. Those are the 3 things you need to focus on, and you also need to read the book, because that book is a very powerful book. It'll change your mind about it'll change your mind about the outlook of work and the way that you approach your knowledge work as well. So if you like videos like this, click right here, and I'll talk to you guys next time.